Hey everybody, Joe here. Thank you for tuning into my channel today. This is actually a re-recording of a replay that I recorded of the second part of a Jund doubleheader that I had, I guess, sometime late last week. I accidentally stopped that recording before I did my replay for the third game of that match. So I'm just going to run through it again here. Looking at the opening hands, I have an island, and with some spells that only require one generic mana after that, like Silvergill Adept, Echoing Truth, Spreading Seas, and Dismember, which I can even cast with the one island. I think this is a clear mulligan here. I'm going to be on the play even, so I'm going to have fewer chances at hitting that top land. On the opponent's side of things, it looks pretty fantastic. They have a fast land for turn 1, forest, swamp for 3 lands hitting all their colors. Kolaghan's Command, fantastic card against Merfolk, can destroy AEther Vials, can destroy Lord of Atlantis, can do a lot of work, basically. Kalidas, really fantastic also, turns all of his removal spells into zombie spells, making little zombies whenever my guys die. We can see that the opponent is testing out Sin Prodder, it's a really interesting card from Shadows over Innistrad. It's a 3-drop red devil, 3/2 with evasion in the form of menace, requiring at least 2 creatures to block it when it attacks. And it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal the top card of your library. Any opponent may have you put that card into your graveyard. If a player does, Sin Prodder deals damage to that player equal to that card's converted mana cost. Otherwise, you put the card into your hand. So if the opponent reveals, say, a Kolaghan's Command from the top of his library, I can have him put that in his graveyard, but I lose 3 life because of that. However, if the opponent shows a land at the top of his graveyard, I can throw at the land top of his library, I can throw that into the graveyard at no cost to myself. So Sin Prodder, a little tricky for the Jund decks when you need to hit lands, because I, as the opponent, can choose to make you put a land into the graveyard during your upkeep. So this is a clear keep on the opponent's side, the last card being Huntmaster of the Fells. Another great card against Merfolk, because whenever it flips over to Ravager of the Fells, it gets to shoot damage at my creatures and at my face. So let's see how my mulligan went. I went down to 6. It's another one-lander, but I have a Silvergill, can help me draw into some good stuff, and a Dismember to slow down the opponent a little bit, and I get a Scry. So it looks like this is probably going to be a keep. I Scry and keep the card on the top of my library. So we'll see what that is next turn. I think it might have been a Mutavault. I'm going to play a Cavern of Souls naming Merfolk and pass the turn. The opponent hits a Tarmogoyf. Going to open with Black Cleave Cliffs, getting it out onto the battlefield untapped. I did hit my Mutavault, so I'm going to play that, and of course follow up with the Silvergill Adept. I'll reveal Merrow Reejerey, since that's likely to be my next creature coming. And I hit a second Merrow Reejerey. I'm really hoping more than anything to draw land at this point. The opponent hits Liliana of the Veil, and with access to double black, that's yet another great choice he has between all of the cards in his hand currently. Now, a little strange, in my opinion, the opponent probably should have played his forest and played out the Tarmogoyf there, even though it'd be a 0/2. Tempo dictates that you need to play your 2 drops on time. Tarmogoyf will inevitably grow, and I mean, if I'm going to use Dismember on him, I'll use it when he's a 3/4 or 4/5, the same way that I'll use it on him when he's a 0/1. So the opponent really just kind of wasting a turn there, in my opinion. So for my turn, I draw a totally useless card with Spreading Seas. I'm going to attack with Silvergill Adept and pass the turn, leaving up mana for Dismember. The opponent draws a second Liliana of the Veil. Is going to use one of them, immediately going down to 1 loyalty to get rid of my Silvergill Adept. So for my turn, I continue to draw suboptimally. I choose to attack Liliana to get her off the table with Mutavault, rather than playing out a Cursecatcher and letting Liliana of the Veil sit on the table any longer than necessary. The opponent untaps, hits his 4th land right on time, drawing very, very well. And he goes ahead and plays out Kalidas, as I mentioned, a really great card against Merfolk. Having no lands, I'm going to play out an AEther Vial and kill Kalidas right now with Dismember. Don't want that guy generating tons and tons of value. With removal spells, making lots of zombies. The opponent hits his 5th land, continuing to draw really well. Taps all 5 to play out a Tarmogoyf and a Sin Prodder. So if we have a look quickly at the graveyards, we're going to see Creature and Planeswalker. And then in my side, we'll see Creature Instant. So Tarmogoyf is a 3/4, Sinprot a 3/2 with Menace. So I'll put a 1 counter on AEther Vial, which is going to be good for Cursecatcher, but I continue to not hit lands. So I'll just pass the turn at this point. Nothing I can really do. I can't attack into Sinprot. The opponent, from the top of his deck for Sinprot, is going to reveal a Wooded Foothills, and I'm going to tell him to throw that in the graveyard. Draws another Wooded Foothills. And with all of these lands and all of these amazing spells, the opponent has a lot of nice options. He's going to use Kolaghan's Command, hitting my AEther Vial, getting back his Kalitas, I believe. So there it is. Gets back the Kalitas. I bring in the Cursecatcher using the AEther Vial while I can. The opponent is at this point going to go ahead and crack his Wooded Foothills to get an untapped Blood Crypt to play Liliana of the Veil, making me sacrifice one of my creatures. So Cursecatcher will be gone. The opponent's going to get in here with Sinprot for 3 damage, leaving up Tarmogoyf to block for Liliana to prevent Mutavault from taking her off the table. So I didn't think that I could do anything from that point. The opponent had a pretty massive advantage. So I went ahead and scooped, and we can see how Game 2 went now. So for the opening hands, alright, I have 2 lands here. A Spreading Seas, Silvergill. All of these spells castable off of my 2 lands, so this is a fantastic Merfolk hand, an easy keep. On the opponent's side of things, we can see he also has 3 lands, with Thoughtseize to take whatever he feels most threatening out of my hand, Lightning Bolt to get rid of one of my creatures, Tarmogoyf once all that stuff is in the graveyard to start closing out the game for the opponent, and we see Choke, which I'm happy to see that I'm successfully playing around with my non-basic islands here. Non-island blue sources. So I'll play Minamo out on my turn, pass it to the opponent, and he draws Terminate. Very nice card to have access to. For his first turn, he'll play a Bloodstained Mire, and he's going to go ahead, crack it, get a blood crypt, and use it to cast Thoughtseize. Now, Jund players typically take Spreading Seas because it can mess up their mana and also draws me into cards. So let's see. The opponent does, in fact, take the Spreading Seas. I'll go ahead and hide that. Draw into a Merrow Reejerey. The opponent doesn't know about that yet. And I'll play out Silvergill Adept. I'm going to reveal one of the cards that the opponent already knows about. And off the Silvergill Adept, I draw into another Lord. This hand is developing really well. One more land would be pretty good. The opponent is also not drawing into lands, so he plays out his Verdant Catacombs here, and chooses not to crack it and play the Tarmogoyf. I guess he knows that I have the Tidebinder in hand, and he could be leaving up Bolt and Terminate here as necessary. So for my turn, I hit another Island Walk Lord. I'm going to attack with the Silvergill here to push 2 damage. He knows that I have Lord, so I'm going to play one out, and then he's going to use the Bolt to get him off the table, and at the end step, he's going to crack his fetch land. Going down to 12 life, gets a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Now the opponent continues, again, not to hit any land, plays a tapped Raging Ravine, and this turn chooses to leave Terminate up, playing very defensively at this point. Now this is getting a little bit funny. I've now seen 6 Island Walk Lords. No, sorry, 5 Island Walk Lords. I attack for 2 again. I'm going to play another Island Walk Lord, and the opponent with access to Terminate is going to get rid of that guy. If we take a second to look at these cards that he knows about, he has seen these 2 Master of the Pearl Trident. He's seen the Cavern of Souls. He has seen the Silvergill Adept. And he knows the Tidebinder in my hand. That's currently the only card he has information about. At this point, the opponent will play out his 4th land, having just drawn it off the top of the deck, and chooses to play out Tarmogoyf, who is a big boy right now, and Scavenging Ooze. So getting some creatures on the table. I hit my 3rd land, play it onto the battlefield, and believe the correct decision here. Now there's a few ways I can go. Of course I can make the most efficient use of my mana and play out Merrow Reejerey, which will give me access to playing 2 2-drops next turn which is always a nice option, but I've been pressuring the opponent's life total all game, little by little, and he's been helping out with shock and fetch lands. So another option is just to play out a Tidebinder Mage, lock down the Tarmogoyf, and attack into the Scavenging Ooze. Ultimately, I decide that that's the route that I'd like to go. I have tons of threats in my hand, and trading with the opponent's creatures or pushing damage I feel is going to be a good route to victory. The opponent chooses to block with the Scavenging Ooze, a little bit strange in my opinion, because he has access to a lot of green mana, could have made the Scavenging Ooze rather large. By eating stuff in the graveyard, could have gained life and saved some time. Draws into Ancient Grudge, which is a strange card for him to be playing out of the sideboard, as he should know that Merfolk sides out its AEther Vials against Jund, and he's going to have 0 targets for the Ancient Grudge. I do bring in 2 Relic of Progenitus, but I can always cycle that unless I am totally tapped out. So, very strange card for the opponent to bring in. But I'm not unhappy to see it. It's just a dead card. Opponent will put the Sin Prodder onto the table, and with this Tarmogoyf locked down, I can proceed to develop my offense. At this point, it's going to be correct to play out the Reejerey and give me access to more mana next turn. I continue my strategy of trading resources with the opponent, attacking in with the Tidebinder Mage. If he wants to trade with the Sin Prodder, that's going to take him off of the potential card advantage that Sin Prodder gives him access to. So he does choose to block, and we trade creatures. The opponent draws another strange sideboard card. It shuffles an enchantment or artifact into its owner's library. So something like a Spreading Seas will get shuffled into my library. I've been told that Jund plays this in the sideboard to deal with Wormcoil Engine specifically, because it doesn't destroy the Wormcoil Engine, it just shuffles it into the opponent's library and prevents the opponent from making baby Wormcoil tokens. So yeah, I understand bringing this one in. It can hit a Spreading Seas. It can hit an AEther Vial if I chose to leave them in. It could hit a Relic of Progenitus. But notably, since it shuffles the card back into the library, it doesn't grow the Tarmogoyf. So sort of a non-synergy there. The opponent taps 3 lands, and looks like he's finally going to play that Choke Out, which is a little bit embarrassing. So he says it's a top deck, but it was not really a top deck. We can see that in the replay. I attacks with the Tarmogoyf, and I take 5 damage. Opponent's not really going to be able to race me here with the Tarmogoyf, with the Merrow Reejerey doing all of my taps and untaps, and making it so that I don't have to even tap his Tarmogoyf myself to bounce him with the Harbinger of the Tides. So we'll get that guy off the table, and with our 2 extra mana, I'm going to think a little bit about what the best 2-drop is to play. I'll go with Silvergill Adept for now, and go with lethal damage next turn. I'm going to untap one of my lands, because I don't really have any other good choices here. Oh, well, I drew into Dismember, which is great because now I'll be able to play that if I want to there with that untapped mana. The opponent goes down to 8, draws a Tarmogoyf, and plays out 2 Tarmogoyfs. However, I don't think he quite respects or realizes the power of the Merrow Reejerey here. So we're going to be able to play out a Lord, untap one of my lands, and then play another Lord, tap one of his Tarmogoyfs down, and just swing with everybody. Now, the smallest creature I have at this point is the Reejerey as a 4/4. We have a 5 power and a 5 power here. He can block one of the 5s, but he's still going to be taking 5 from another one and 4 from this guy, so that's going to be lethal. The opponent sees that and says good game and scoops it up there. So we can go ahead now to this final 3rd game. This is one that I missed the first time I tried to record this match. For some reason, it just slipped my mind. Looking at the opening hands, I have a 2-lander with a Spreading Seas, which is one of our best cards against Jund. Always extremely happy to see that in the opening hand. An Island Walk Lord that will synergize with the Spreading Seas. So after the Island Walk Lord as a 2-drop, we have Reejerey as a 3-drop, Master of Waves as a 4-drop, and a Dismember to take away one of his threats. On the opponent's side of things, we see that he has a 1-land hand. I can't imagine that is a keep, although he does have 3 hand disruption spells, which can slow me down quite a bit while he tries to draw into his lands. We see that he doesn't have extremely costly spells, with Tarmogoyf only requiring 1 generic mana past the land that he currently has. Abrupt Decay requiring 1 more specific mana, and Kitchen Finks requiring 2 more mana. So I could think the opponent could keep if he's hoping that he can draw into lands. He is on the play here, so I don't know, seems a little sketchy. Let's see what he tries to do here. He chose to keep. Very interesting keep. You guys let me know what you think about that triple hand disruption, 1 land keep. Seems a little bit aggressive from the opponent. Wisely, I think he opens with Inquisition, because he can see what I have and then use Thoughtseize for anything that the Inquisition couldn't hit. He's going to go ahead and take Spreading Seas away. That would have been an enormous blowout against his single land. For myself, I'm also hoping to hit some lands. I'll start with the basic island here. I know I'm going to have to play it out at some point to play my spells. We see the opponent plays his second Inquisition here. He drew into a Tarmogoyf rather than a land. So I'm going to reveal my hand again to the opponent and see what he chooses to take this time with the Inquisition. Well, he takes one of my Merrow Reejereys. I think that he realized how powerful that spell was last game. So for my turn, I draw a land. That's really great. But let's see. Attempting to play around Choke to the extent possible, I play out my Cavern of Souls and the Lord of Atlantis. On the opponent's turn, we can see he plays out his 3rd hand disruption spell and continues to not hit any lands. What is he going to take away this time? With Thoughtseize, I have to imagine he's going to take away the Master of Waves. It's a very powerful spell, but turn 3 Merrow Reejerey is not too great either, and he chooses to go with the Reejerey. He sees that I don't have the lands for Master of Waves, so that might have been the correct decision by the opponent. But I do draw into my 4th land, attack for 2, and play out my island, which the opponent knows about. So he does draw into his 2nd land. If we think for a moment, I've hit my 3 lands, so he's hitting his 2nd land here on his 4th turn. So he missed 2 land drops, falling really behind on tempo. Now, he played an untapped Overgrown Tomb and proceeded not to play anything on his own main phase, strongly representing some removal on my turn. So I draw into a Dispel, which is great because it might hit whatever removal he's got. I'll attack for 2. The opponent's going to hit with Abrupt Decay, and I will follow up with my 4th land and play Master of Waves, bringing 4 power to the table, threatening to close this game out pretty quickly. However, on the opponent's side of things, we see that he has 2 Tarmogoyfs, as well as an Unravel the Aether, a Kolaghan's Command, which would be great if he can draw into another land, and a Kitchen Finks to gain him some life. So let's see which direction he chooses to go. He plays out the Tarmogoyf, and the opponent at this point only knows that I have the Dismember. I can close that hand and just check out what we've got in our graveyards here. For my turn, I draw a Lord, which is quite good. I'm going to look at my graveyard over here. Looks like we have instant, land, sorcery, creature, enchantment. So the Tarmogoyf is correctly labeled as a 5/6 here. So I'm going to choose to get in with the Elemental here. Now, I feel like a wise opponent might choose to take this. He knows that I have the Dismember in hand. So I'm going to Dismember. The Tarmogoyf's power is going to go all the way down to 0, and my Elemental will even get to live here. So Tarmogoyf getting hit by a Dismember that he otherwise couldn't have gotten hit with. And just to keep pressuring the opponent's life total, I'm going to play out the Lord here, and I'll have access to Dispel, leaving an island untapped just in case he plays out Choke. The opponent draws into his 3rd land, which is very good for him. Plays out a Kitchen Finks, gaining some life. And for my draw step, I hit a 2nd Dispel. Now this Kitchen Finks is complicating things a little bit, because I don't want the opponent gaining too much life, but I can't sit back too long and let him develop. So he draws into a fast land, always an awkward 4th land for Jund to draw. Plays out Kolaghan's Command, trying to hit my Lord of Atlantis. Before we go ahead and rush out a Dispel, we always want to make sure we know what modes the opponent is choosing, just to make sure we know what his game plan is. What is important to the opponent? Is the opponent trying to get back a Tarmogoyf from his graveyard, or is the opponent trying to make me discard? Really important just to get the details on this before we counterspell it. So he's trying to kill my Lord and make me discard. I don't like those modes, so I'll go ahead and counter it. Now, the opponent already tapped out, so it didn't matter which land I tapped there because he couldn't play Choke that turn anyway. For my draw step, I hit a Merrow Reejerey, which is fantastic because I'll be able to leave up Dispel mana. So I'll play the Merrow Reejerey, hoping to draw into subsequent Merfolk so that I can tap down any blockers the opponent might play. At this point, I realize it might be correct, given my board presence, to attack into the Kitchen Finks with the Elemental. I'm happy to trade the Elemental for the Kitchen Finks, letting the opponent gain a little bit of life, but getting the Kitchen Finks just closer to the graveyard. Now, he just chose to take the 2 damage there. Interesting decisions. The Kitchen Finks is mainly in the deck sort of as a blocker, I think, against aggressive decks, but the opponent chose to not block there. Okay, so we see the opponent draws a Sin Prodder for their turn. We can see that these Unravel the Aethers continue to do nothing. Although, to be fair, Spreading Seas would be a great draw here, and Unravel the Aether would have a chance if he had his mana tapped correctly. Well, tapped, I don't know. If he had extra green mana, he could get rid of my Spreading Seas, taking me off of Island Walk. Spreading Seas is a very threatening card for the opponent right now. I hit a Silvergill, which is a little bit tricky because I can't cast him right now since I have no Merfolk in hand. And with this Tarmogoyf on the table, it doesn't look like I have profitable attacks right now. So a bit frustrating on my side of things. The opponent draws into an Inquisition, which will allow him, if he chooses, to take away my Silvergill Adept. So seeing my hand, the opponent is going to have to choose between Dispel and Silvergill Adept. So he takes a Silvergill Adept. Really solid choice. Because it is a really great card, and if I draw any Merfolk, I'm going to be able to get that guy onto the table, and he'll give me a tap trigger with Merrow Reejerey. The opponent plays his Sin Prodder and passes the turn. The opponent is actually drawing pretty equal at this point, having kept a 1-land hand. Now, this is a pretty spectacular top deck. I have a pretty potent board state right now. Merrow Reejerey is going to give me a tap trigger, so I have a lot of options here. If we think carefully about it, the Master is going to make my other Lords into 4/4s. It's going to make the Master of Waves into a 5/4, and the Elemental will remain a 2/1. So if I use the Master of Pearl Trident, cast him, tap down the Tarmogoyf, and attack with 2 4/4s, a 5/4, and a 2/1 into Kitchen Finks and Sin Prodder, we're going to be able to push a really healthy amount of damage this turn. So again, wisely sort of tapping the non-islands in case the opponent plays Choke. I'm going to cast the Master of the Pearl Trident, tapping his Tarmogoyf. Having figured out that my creatures are rather large at this point, I'll just Alpha Strike. And I still have Dispel up. This is a card that the opponent knows about. No surprises there for the opponent, but they are tapped out, so Dispel is not going to be particularly relevant here. Now, I think the opponent might not have realized that Master of Waves has protection from red. Might have needed to sort of block and then change his blocks, and so he's going to think about it a little bit. And if he blocks like this, he's going to take 5 and 2. So he's going to gain 2 life from the Kitchen Finks, netting -5. So Kitchen Finks will come back with a -1 counter on him after the Persist trigger. Go down to a 2/1. Sin Prodder will die to the 4/4 Merrow Reejerey. And with the opponent drawing into a land, we can see that I'm just totally overpowering him here, and the opponent scooped it up. So thanks very much, as always, for watching. Please subscribe if you're not already. Leave some comments if you have any thoughts on the match. This last one was really interesting. With the opponent keeping a 1-land hand, ultimately we can see that they got to play out all of their spells. In the end, drawing even 1 too many lands, that last land would have been much, much better as anything else, particularly as, I guess, a Damnation. That would have equalized things a little bit. Dispel can't hit sorceries, so that would have been a good top deck. We could see that he was sitting in a couple of games with rather useless artifact and enchantment removal. Possibly not the best things to bring in, although Unravel the Aether is certainly better than Ancient Grudge. So guys, thanks again for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.